All right, so hi everyone, thank you for having me. This is all set up, we're good to go? Yeah, okay. So the mandate that I was given today was to talk about pedagogy, some pedagogical aspect, along with content, and to make it interactive in 45 minutes. So we have a tall order. We'll do what we can to kind of get a bit of everything. And our topic for today is leading a great discussion. Some discussions go well, and there's energy in the room, and students are thinking and they're engaged. And others, we have high hopes for them, and they kind of fall flat. As with many things in teaching, very often, yes, external circumstances can be a factor. The students just had a big test, or a social situation was created, but more often than not, it's not due to external circumstances, but if we break down the pedagogy of it, there are really very concrete strategies, approaches, techniques that can often account for whether things go well and are successful, or whether they kind of fizzle out and really don't meet our expectations in terms of where we're hoping it was going to get to. So our goal, we're going to be discussing class discussions and how to make them really solid. Okay, question that I'm going to put out to you. Should we expect that every single student in the class will participate in the class discussion? Is that a reasonable expectation? And with your permission, we're going to go around I think I pressed something. Okay. I can't mess this up. I can't press anything. We're good? Okay. So I'm going to ask everyone to just share a quick yes or no to that question. Is it reasonable, meaning is it reasonable to say that in my class discussions, I would like all students to participate, or is that just like being a little too ambitious, a little too out of reach, and that's just not really a reasonable expectation? So with your permission, a quick yes or no. Just yes or no?
If it's distance, yes.
Okay.
I don't want to participate.
Okay.
No. Yes.
No.
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 I will give you another option, a substantive unsure. Not like I'm not sure because I just don't really know, but like I really have this side and that side. I'm giving you that option to.
I would like every
You're not keeping to the rules.
I know. No, I would like every student to participate.
Okay.
No. Can I say you have to participate?
Nope. Okay.
Yes. Yes, and I have to.
Okay.
elaborate, but not-
Now we're not going to get too deep into this just for the purpose of time, but I would love to hear one on each side explain their reasoning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Participating is also listening. So you want them engaged even if they're not actively participating.
Okay.
While we want them, I agree with what you said, and while we want them to participate, I don't, for a variety of reasons, not everyone is going to be able to participate either in the same way, or just, there are students that just can't always participate, even if that is something that we would like to expect from all our students.
We also have the law of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need 30 people, 15 of them saying the same exact thing. Whoever has a different angle, let them talk. If you don't,
Okay.
that's fine.
You and then Jeremy, and then we'll go on. Yes. All right. I don't know your name. What's your name?
Ovadia.
Ovadia, please.
I think you have to clarify the question about always reasonable. It's clearly reasonable because it just happened.
Good. Very good. We just did it, meaning we'll build on that. But
Now we're trying to have more productive participation, and not everyone's going to get a chance to speak. So I think the diminishing returns.
correct. But your point, which we were going to get to, is an important one, meaning we just found a way, correct, not everyone is expressing thoughts upon thoughts, but we just found a way to have a certain class discussion and for everyone to be involved in some meaningful way.
It's not a discussion.
So that could be an open, where it goes determines if it's a discussion or not. Correct? We are not going to be using it for a full-fledged discussion, but as a tool in class discussions, opening up with what is called a whip-around question, and then different people can pipe in, we can kind of flesh it out more, is one way of that on some level. Again, that doesn't mean that everyone, as you correctly pointed out, we don't want everyone giving us long sermons, but everyone was thinking about it, processing, contributing, and being engaged in it.
Nothing new.
Okay. Is it okay if we, one last thing, and then we'll.
It very much depends on class size. I mean, you can't, in a class of 35 to 40 kids in an Israeli classroom have the same level of discussion as a 15-kid class in an American classroom.
So there will be many significant differences. There may still be ways to engage everyone. Again,
I'm not
not.
talking about engagement. I'm talking about just participation.
Oh, I'm defining engagement as participation. Sorry. Meaning engagement as like kind of half listening, half not, maybe yes, maybe no. I'm not even using that.
You know, you have an initial 1 or 2 word answer, and then as the discussion progresses, you have more.
Correct. There's no question that in a large classroom, it is going to be, the rules of the game are going to be different, and our goals and our ambitions are going to be different. But I would still like to argue that even in a large classroom, ideally, we would love to aim for everyone to be involved and to kind of hold our, we'll first work with the ideal, and then we'll size it down to what realistically can happen, but not skipping that step of what we can aim for. Yeah, I'm breaking my own rules.
You don't want one person hogging the stage all the time. And at the other end, you don't want one person just sits in his chair the whole year and never says a word.
And we are going to discuss, hopefully, if time permits, address both of those very important angles.
It may not happen in the same hour, but during the week,
Fair
you
enough.
should make it a point to really get to everyone in the class.
Definitely, I definitely hear that, and perhaps our measure shouldn't be in any one given 15-minute slot, but a bit of a bigger perspective. Okay, so here's our overview of what we're going to do, again, depending on where we get to, given our time limitations. We're going to talk about the goals of a class discussion. We'll talk a little bit about the question prompts. We'll talk about strategies to deepen the discussion, help students speak and be heard, help students feel good about participating, and if we have time, we're going to deal with specific student profiles, as you brought up, enthusiastic Elizabeth, shy Shoshana, off-topic Ovadia, and just generally incorrect answers. I didn't know you were going to be here, Ovadia. Okay. All right. Okay. So in talking about our goals in a class, in having a class discussion, let's actually first talk about what's not our goals. Meaning, what is indicators that our class discussion is not meeting what we hoped, we're not accomplishing what we hope to accomplish.
The teacher speaks the entire hour.
For sure.
Totally veering off the subject.
Like not sticking to, okay, yes.
Not having it be a kind of, can you provide this information? Yes, I can provide this information, and regurgitate. You don't want that.
There's no thinking involved. Yeah, definitely. What else?
Not having an outcome.
Not doing anything productive with it. Great. And to shifting to what are our goals in a class discussion? What are the goals? What do we want? What are we hoping to get out of it? Or what are we hoping to accomplish with our students?
Well, building on what the instructor said last session, Hasnama.
Great.
So they're working through this in their own words,
Mm-hmm.
their own ideas, they're not limited to what I've given them in front of them.
Great.
And then hopefully they will internalize those concepts and not just use it as a way to have free expression with no meaning.
Great. It sounds like the combination of deep thinking and internalization, or owning the topic or the concept or the value or whatever direction we're going.
I think also you want to make sure that it's basically the same, that they understand what your topic is.
Mm-hmm. That there's effective communication. I say hi and you hear and understand hi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could it motivate textual learning after?
Great. Like so kind of fitting into our bigger picture of our learning goals.
I think critical thinking and their ability to start forming opinions is really what comes out in class discussions.
Great.
Because you have to hear other people and think about whether that sits with you or not.
Great.
And how to respond to it and articulate your own thoughts.
Great. Great. So if I just jotted down a few, which I think basically jive quite well, to get people to think, to get people to better understand their own views, help them start thinking about things and what are their opinions, what do they think about things, to expose people to different sides of the issue, to get students animated and invested, bringing concepts alive. There's certainly, students love to share their opinion on things, and even I've seen certain classes where the textual element, they'll kind of be dragged through it, but they're not really in it, but suddenly give them a chance to tell you whether they think something is fair or not, and they are with you and excited and engaged. And lastly, to convey perhaps a message or a value, that could be a possible goal. Okay, and therefore, whatever, we discussed what we're going to do. Okay, question prompt. Let's play a game of what is wrong with this question prompt. I received this as a submission from a student of mine when we were discussing the whole topic of class discussions. And the prompt that she created, it was younger elementary. What special mitzvah did Abraham do? That's right, Hachnasat Orchim. And why is Hachnasat Orchim a mitzvah? What's wrong? What's the...
And she probably thought this was such a deep thing.
Yes, she did.
But we can't say Hachnasat Orchim is a mitzvah, because God is the one who gives mitzvah.
We can't say what.
That's an issue for me.
Very short answer. There's a very short answer. It doesn't go further.
Yeah. Anyone want to add to that? Yes, definitely. When I read the, oh yeah, go ahead.
We end up with something like very touchy-feely, like helping everybody else, and then we also have a mitzvah l'chiyat amalek, you know, like.
So you are all thinking very deeply and in a very sophisticated way. I'm going much simpler. Why is Hachnasat Orchim a mitzvah? I have no idea what you mean by this question. I think it's a mitzvah because it's in the Torah. Do you mean like, why are we bound by mitzvahs? Do you mean why are, pro-social behaviors included in mitzvahs? Why is Hachnasat Orchim a mitzvah? I don't know what you mean by that. Another example, also something that I received. This teacher was talking about Chizkiyahu, and he got and she was very looking forward to this really juicy, engaging, thought-provoking class discussion, and she opened up this discussion with, what are the limits of our emunah? And I'm thinking, do you mean like my emunah? Do you mean like a person's emunah? Do you mean where should our emunah be? Do you mean, like, I just saw this question, and again, she was very excited to have this very interesting class discussion, but the question prompt was very non-transparent. It was very not clear where she was heading, and best case scenario, you need to the class will look at you with a quizzical look. You'll have to re-explain it in simpler or more clear, direct words. But worst case scenario, you have students who are like, don't really know what she's talking about. I think I'm going to tune out now. I'm just not really going to be involved. And you really have lost a good part of the students who could have been involved in a meaningful conversation.
How would you rephrase the question?
So I don't know what she meant, in which case I actually can't rephrase it. But someone might say, what are different situations that might help our emunah grow? What are different scenarios? Has anyone had what might be possible experiences that challenge our emunah? What are possible experiences that actually help us increase we found we emerge with stronger emunah, potentially? But I very much emphasize to my students the importance when thinking of the question prompt of not just, it is clear in my mind, and therefore I'm going to assume it is clear to everyone else, but to kind of look back with a fresh set of eyes to make sure that we are being very clear and transparent so that a good, deep, substantive discussion can ensue. Okay. Another issue, which again is sort of obvious, but they're saying avoiding the let's give her what she wants us to say mode, and instead the let's think seriously mode. So, is it a good idea to set aside time for learning Torah? Yes, Torah is the best. Meaning, like, making sure, again, looking back at our questions. And it's okay if we have a certain agenda in bringing up, a conversation. Generally speaking, we want to be goal-oriented, and when we bring things up, it's because we believe there's value to it. But if we prevent this whole real discussion from happening if from the get-go it's very clear exactly what we want to hear and how we want to hear it. Okay. So to summarize and to add a couple of things, we said the question should be clear. It should not be leading in terms of just being very clear what we want them to say. Provocative, obviously, like when something is interesting, when it speaks to students, they're much more likely to be willing and interested in participating. And lastly, avoiding yes or no unless using the whip question, meaning anytime we start off with a yes or no question, then that kind of stagnates the discussion that can ensue. Better to phrase it in kind of a broader way, or to what extent or in what ways, as opposed to yes or no questions. Other than the whip question, when there was actually, I specifically wanted a question that was very clear, concise, yes, no, so that I could give everyone a chance to participate in a way that did not take the amount of time of theoretically 25 people giving their expanded views on something. Okay, shifting on ways to deepen the discussion. In terms, when we're keeping the discussion going, asking students to support what they're saying as opposed to just kind of, especially when it is linked to a textual class, then asking them to look back, for example, where in the text do you see indications that the Navi gave up on these people? So throughout the discussion, you can actually, you flip them back and say, give me the basis for what you're saying, or what in here actually may not support what you're saying or show a different perspective than what you're saying. So linking it back. Deflecting in the opposite direction when things are slowing down, kind of raising the question, who doesn't agree? It feels like people are generally going the same direction, then purposely and deliberately, who doesn't agree with this and why, just to kind of help students develop their range of views or their ability to understand different sides.
Wouldn't that only be good if you were asking an opinion question and not, why is the Torah wrong? Like, wouldn't that put her, make her feel bad?
Definitely. It would have to be a situation where you really believe there are many legitimate sides and you're clear about the fact that it's many legitimate sides. Yes, definitely. We want to avoid the let's pick on a Torah day. Yes, that's next week. Okay. Bringing in sources or anecdotes to show different angles, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in a minute when we talk about advanced planning. Now, sometimes we relate to class discussions as, that's great, it'll be 20 minutes and it's virtually no preparation on my part. Like, this sounds wonderful for my very busy evening the night before. But in fact, advanced planning and discussions really can go a long way. And when we discuss this with my students, I talk about having your question prompt clearly thought out, and then having at least 3 different questions for deepening the discussion. Sometimes we don't need them. Sometimes students on their own really flesh the topic out and explore different angles and really scratch the surface on their own. And other times we're hoping they're going to get further places and it just kind of dries out a little bit, and having questions to help them, to help move them along in their thinking on the topic. So a couple of examples. So the prohibition of ribbis only applying to Jewish borrowers, and that being something that can kind of trouble students. What does that mean? Are we not sensitive towards non-Jews as well? What does that tell us about the Torah's way of relating to non-Jews? So, having a guided discussion about that and coming in kind of with, in my own mind, I have these multiple questions for directing them, but they're pre-planned, which means that my likelihood of things getting to a substantive place are much higher because I am armed with very concrete directions I can take. To what extent does this reflect a perspective of the Torah not caring about how we treat non-Jews? What are other business laws in Torah that do apply to our dealings with non-Jews? And we mentioned potentially having sources on hand. When looking at the Nitziv's introduction to Sefer Bereshit, how does this inform our view on how the Torah wants us to treat non-Jews? And I just shared a little excerpt here that can be shared with students just about how the Torah is Sefer Bereshit is Sefer Yesharim, because we're meant to be learning upstanding ways of interacting with everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike. וזה היה השבח האבות שמלבד שהיו צדיקים וחסידים ואוהבי השם באופן היותר אפשר. עוד היו ישרים, they were also not just pious and righteous, they had integrity, they were very yashar, honest and decent people. היינו שהתנהגו עם אומות העולם, אפילו עובדי אלילים מכוערים, the way they interacted with non-Jews and even non-Jews whose values were drastically different than the values of the Jewish people. מכל מקום היו עמם באהבה, וחשו לטובתם באשר היא קיום הבריאה. כמו שאנו רואים כמה השתתח Avraham Avinu להתפלל על סדום. So meaning showing this angle, hang on just one second, and having them reflect on how does this relate to, or how does this play a role in our understanding of how we're meant to be relating to and perceiving non-Jews, especially in the context of something that could seem potentially troubling, of not being allowed to charge interest to non-Jews and not to Jews. Last question, are there things you would do for your parents and siblings but not for others? If so, to what extent is that unethical? Kind of building that idea that perhaps the way, it's not that we don't care about non-Jews, but perhaps we relate to Jews as our own inner circle of family, and sometimes there are higher standards. There are things I would do for my sister that I wouldn't do for the random person on the street. That's not that I don't like the random person on the street, that's that I have, because of my greater closeness and love, there are things I would do for people I'm very, very close with that I wouldn't necessarily do, so perhaps that's a perspective. I've heard the name of Rav Rosenzweig on this whole idea of why are we allowed to charge interest but non-Jews and not permitted to do so with Jews. So coming with these sets of questions pre-prepared. Now again, many of many of us, and possibly correctly so, would say, well, I'm pretty good at doing it on the fly, and there is a good chance that we come in with that capacity. At the same time, generally speaking, when we are pre-planned and deliberate, the quality, the pedagogical quality, and the quality of the discourse and of the discussion is augmented when we do invest time in planning. Yes?
Also, your efficiency in terms of time
Yes.
is always better when you plan ahead.
100%. True. Yes, please.
Could you go back to the first 3 layers? I'm just trying to figure it out. Really, layer 1 and layer 2, could you switch them? I'm just trying to.
Definitely. Meaning layer 1 I viewed as like kind of the starting point where like, but definitely. And you can play with these things however you want. It's the idea of giving thought and advanced planning. It could one of the layers could be a little anecdote. Well, how would you apply it to this case? There are really infinite directions. This is not at all scripted, but it's kind of this approach to class discussions where it's not just, it looks spontaneous to students and it feels spontaneous to students, but we're actually being very deliberate and very planned in advance about it. Another example, Yaakov lying in order to take the brachot from Esav. So whip around question, here I put that in. So for younger students, is it always wrong to lie? Are there times when it's okay to lie? For older students, which of the following is more accurate? Option A, something can be sort of true and sort of not true. Option B, by definition, something is either true or not true. That's what makes it the truth. So kind of having that to start off. And then different layers in light of Rashi's explanation of Anochi, Esav b'chorecha, I am me, and Esav's your bechor, where he kind of reinterprets Yaakov's words in a way that is not overt lying. Did he say that? Is this considered telling the truth? Is this lying? Is it somewhere in between? And how does that relate back? What are examples of situations when one is permitted to lie? And then I've read an interesting kind of exchange or piece and then a response between Rav Dessler and Mark Shapiro, where Rav Dessler kind of explains that truth should not necessarily be seen in narrow terms. Sometimes there is truth that ultimately leads to not good things. And there's, let's say, for example, being critical of someone in an inappropriate way, and ultimately it leads to bad. So yes, it's true in the narrow sense, but it's not necessarily true in the cosmic sense. Or you can have certain times where you say falsehood, but it's actually for a good cause, and therefore, so it is an interesting perspective on it. And then, a response where Mark Shapiro raises the question: when we need to lie, is it better to kind of redefine truth and fit that back in? Or is it better off, what are the advantages and disadvantages of saying that versus saying there's a value of truth, there are other competing values, and one can sometimes trump the other, and what are the relative, advantages and disadvantages of each approach? And so again, this is just an example, but you can kind of play with what you would bring in along the way, stories, sources, anecdotes, or just other thought questions, but having those prepared as what's your name? Ruthie, as Ruthie said, first of all, is much more efficient and gives you a much more focused on-target discussion, and also can help you get to deeper, more, thought-provoking, stimulating places. Okay, ways to help all students speak and be heard, and I say speak and be heard because I'm talking about both helping students speak up and not be shy, and also be heard, how students can listen to each other in a respectful way. So wait time, that is not a concept that is unique to class discussions, but it is, the general, I assume it's a familiar concept of not asking a question and immediately taking answers, but asking a question, waiting a whole bunch of seconds, giving students time to process, benefiting everyone in terms of having them time to think a little bit more deeply, and specifically the students who are not as quick-paced in their cognitive processing, but giving them the extra few seconds to process, and then they're then able to offer either more comfortably offer an answer or offer a more developed answer.
Especially when you're asking a question in Hebrew and they're not native speakers.
Very true. Yes, definitely. All the more so, for sure. Then we might use, wait time times 2. Considering a pregame warm-up. So we use the whip around where everyone kind of gave a very short answer to a specific question. Another option is before any class discussion, the question is asked, and everyone has a few minutes to just write down, formulate their thoughts on the topic. And in that way, it's not sprung upon people where they kind of, oh, wait, what do I think? I don't know. But everyone has a chance to think about it. Some people, specifically through writing, happen to develop their thoughts in a clearer way. And so in this way, when the class discussion starts, everyone has already had a chance to think, to write. You may have circulated and had a little exchange with a student or two, but in that way, students who maybe are more shy or more inhibited to kind of just speak up on the spot will feel more confident. It happens to be that if you go around and there's a particularly shy student who wrote something interesting, you can even say to them at that time, is it okay? I like what you wrote. I think you wrote down some really important things. Is it okay if I call on you to share that with the class? And can I invite you to do that afterwards? And you're really respecting the fact that they may not naturally be as comfortable speaking up as some of the more louder students, but you're giving them a space to think, and you're respectfully asking their permission to invite them to share. Okay, never be a parrot. And what I mean by that is I actually think I may have learned this from you, Jeremy, years ago in Yeshiva Flatbush. If you remember, there was it was someone in Yeshiva Flatbush. I don't remember if it was you or someone else, but the idea of not repeating back what students said, not reiterating it. What's the downside? What happens when I repeat what students said? What am I teaching students? No need to listen to each other. I'll be sure to tell you what everyone else said, and you can just tune out when everyone else is talking, because the only one you really need to listen to is me, because you'll get it there anyway.
That also makes them think that what you said is correct, when you could just be repeating after what they said as an opinion.
You're saying it may also convey
and then
incorrect.
That is, but you said
right.
Such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the student is not putting it in a sophisticated, clear manner.
Yes. Yes. And in that case, it's a deliberate kind of paraphrasing to help for clarity, but you're not just parroting back what they said to make sure. And so what do you do? Someone said something you don't think everyone heard, so what can you do instead of repeating it? Either one. Either call on did you hear what she said? Do you want to repeat that for us? Or, Ovadia, what you said was great. Can you say it again for us? But not teaching them covertly that you can just ignore everyone else, because you can just, I'll make sure to give you what you need to hear. And then in general, talking less and facilitating more. So even let's say reading a student's face, Shaya, you seem very uncomfortable with Yona's decision to run away from Hashem. What do you think was motivating Yona to do this? Or Tammy, that's a great observation that Yirmiyahu reminds you of Shimshon and that they were both appointed to their position before they were born. Can you think of anyone else that seemed to have a special status either from before they were born or from the time they were a young child? Meaning, as teachers, sometimes our natural intuition is to kind of jump in and be like, oh yeah, and let me connect it to this for you. Let me remind you of that, but kind of holding ourselves back and switching into facilitator mode as much as possible, even though we really do have a lot to share on the topic, but helping them process and get there. In terms of ways to help students to feel good about participating, now obviously everything is interconnected, where if they feel good about it, they'll be more likely to be engaged, but just for the sake of organization, names, just use their names all the time. It doesn't cost anything. It's a really small investment of time, but people feel like you see them and you hear them, and their words are valued when you call them by name and address them by name. Positive feedback. So sometimes teachers want to repeat back what students said because they perceive it as a way of giving that positive feedback, but there really are very good replacements for that, pointing out the value in what a student shared. So Yosef just took our conversation to a new level meaning I suppose that Yosef said he took our conversation to a new level. Or Ariella, you're highlighting for us a completely opposite dimension that we hadn't considered. Not just, that was an interesting point or great or thank you or whatever, but really kind of helping them understand how they are contributing to our class discussion. One idea I saw that I thought was great, a teacher had a post-it, they called it Einstein's, where if a student said a particularly insightful comment or a particularly sharp question, the teacher went over, put those special post-its, whatever they had on them, on their desk, and those would be used as extra credit, and meaning it's not even a gimmick, because the point is it really did demonstrate real cognitive engagement and a substantive, important contribution to the class learning process. So that's just another way of motivating you're conveying that you really value their deep thought, and it's a small gimmick that really can help them be motivated to push themselves and to not just kind of tune out and take it in, but to really push themselves to process and to think deeply.
Can I ask how you express to a student when they clearly say something which is completely wrong?
Yes.
What do you say to them?
I will put it back to you. Yes, thoughts?
Try to find a kernel, a nugget of something right, and say,
Okay, but you told them part of what they said was right, but actually what they said was wrong. So how do you tell them what they said was wrong and not in what they said was right, if that's the case?
I think that we can distinguish between saying something is correct and thanking them for their for participating. So I personally I might say, we're actually going in a bit of a different direction, but thank you for sharing that, or thank you for participating. I think that, meaning on the one hand, we don't want to perpetuate false information. On the other hand, we don't want to give students a bad feeling and embarrass them. And so my personal zone of comfort is to thank them and acknowledge their participation while, in delicate terms, redirecting or clarifying that you're not endorsing the accuracy of that statement.
All ages?
I believe so, but what's behind that question? Because
sometimes as they get older, they also want to know whether they're saying something that's valid or not.
So, meaning you're wondering whether it's Dafka shouldn't do it with older, or Dafka should do it with older.
Do it nicely but differently.
I think that the way I perceive, in teaching, there's never an ironclad rule for everything. I believe this is appropriate for all ages, meaning at all ages we want students to feel like they want to participate and that they're, and no one's going to want to participate if they see people being shot down, even if I wasn't the one shot down, but I saw someone else being kind of put down, get the silence quickly, that would dissuade me from participating. So I think that at any age we want to appreciate their contributions, but also maintain the accuracy of what's being conveyed.
I would suggest, first of all, it depends on the existing relationship you have with students in the classroom and how you want to deal with it. And the second thing is, I think that after class is always a good time to talk to students about things that happened in class. And sometimes it might be worthwhile to go over to them and say, I always want you to speak up in class, but that was really wrong.
Definitely.
Everybody else took it as right, correct, and they.
Well, no, I think you have to use some method of making clear that it was wrong in class, but you could be blunter about it after class when it's not in front of everybody.
But if it's a discussion like you had up on the board, limits to Emunah, for example, that's a hashkafa discussion. And in a mixed classroom with students that come from a range of family backgrounds, you could get students who may ask a very difficult question, and questions in Emunah are catchy among students. So it almost turns that into a teachable moment that you have to convey that that's not the way that we want to go, or that's perhaps not a value of the school, or this is how you describe and address that question. And saving it all after class doesn't prevent the other kids in the class from now having that question too.
Right, okay, so it's a very important question, but I would distinguish between you brought things in a certain direction versus a spontaneous question that arose from the students that you need to then decide which direction to go in. Which is sort of its own thing. I guess in short, I would say that we do need to, there are things that are high stakes here. Not everything can just be, oh, everything's right, everything's good. At the same time, I do think we can always exercise our right to say, I would love to address that, let's do that this coming Friday, or meaning in a way that you can kind of bring it back to your terms and frame it in a way that you want to, and guide it in a way that you think will be most productive, as opposed to, he asked an important question, that must mean I need to address it right here, right now. Okay, yes?
There's also a need to make a quick assessment on your feet of why that answer was forthcoming, and to in some ways redirect the answer rather than just sort of say, let's go on to somebody else and say, you may have thought that because this, or why is it that you came up with that answer? And so kind of transform the whole thing into a way of learning what people might have thought sort of quick on the fly, and say, no, but if you think about it in this way, maybe you'll come to the right answer. So kind of giving credit for some mental activity on the part of the person who provided that answer, but
yes, there is no question that the facilitator of the discussion, the teacher, is going to be, with any amount of suggestions and strategies and orientations, there's always going to be, in the moment, quick judgment that you're going to be using in terms of understanding what they're saying and why and where you want to go with it. Definitely. Okay. I want to share one idea, and then if we have time, we'll go back to this. I saw one teacher talk about a fishbowl activity during a class discussion, when you want to help your students become better at the class discussion, whether that's the way they respond to people they don't agree with, whether it's listening to the skill of not just, sometimes in a conversation everyone is just holding on in their mind to what they want to say next, and they're being patient while other people are speaking, but they're not listening to the other people speaking, and they're kind of just jumping in with their own side or anecdote rather than responding substantively. So one class had, one teacher suggested a fishbowl discussion. You have some participants in the middle having this discussion. Everyone on the outside is watching them, and after 15 minutes, whatever the time is, they actually comment on the mechanics of that discussion. So if you want to raise the discourse of the discussion, or you want to help students learn how to respond more sensitively to opinions they don't agree with, or whatever your kind of meta social emotional goals are in the context of this discussion, because as we say, our ultimate goal is not just that students know things, but that they also have proper social skills and ben adam lachavero, and all these classroom mechanisms are opportunities to develop that as well. You can have this meta element to the discussion where you have these concentric circles, and the outside observers are actually commenting on the process as opposed to the actual content of the discussion.
What age would you say this activity would work for?
I think it depends how you do it. I saw it in a totally different context. I saw a teacher using a similar, it was actually in a math class with fairly young students. You'd obviously have to be very concrete about what they're looking for and what your goals are, but I don't see why, if you adjust things based on age, I don't see why you couldn't use it for the gamut of ages.
You're telling me in the beginning of class I assign positions, or it's developed naturally?
Meaning you may decide, I don't think you would assign positions, but you would assign either one group or the other group, meaning either you're on the inside circle or you're on the outside circle.
You're telling me I'm actually restructuring the class?
Yes, they are sitting in two circles.
So this is not happening.
Not always, just for that activity.
Just for the activity.
High school students are actually more able to discuss nuances in this, meaning there are things you were probably wondering, how could you do this with little kids? It makes sense for big kids, meaning
No, I'm just trying to imagine the physical construction.
there is a circle of chairs and another circle of chairs.
My son did it as a kindergartner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in a disagreement with two kids. They were both fighting over who sits next to each other on the bus.
Wow.
The kindergarten teacher had them talk about the issue.
Wow.
And all the kindergartners comment on ideas.
Wow. Wow. So this is definitely something that could be adopted to many different situations, but it is a way to get them to reflect not just on the content, but on the process as well. Okay, in the couple of minutes remaining, okay, we spoke a little bit about Shai Shoshana. What did we say can be done for Shai students to help them feel comfortable participating? Yes. What else? Yes.
And so you could give them like a prep before and say, is it okay if I call on you? Or I'll give you some time to think about it and then I'll call on you.
You could even give it, you can give it in the class before, you can give it as a homework assignment before. You can even think of, if there's a specific student who you think is just very, very shy, you can have conversations with them about it in advance, and, meaning there are different ways to go in it, but kind of not screening, avoiding the shyness, but being able to address it again in a safe and sensitive and respectful way. Overly enthusiastic Elizabeth, the one who always wanted to, yes?
Get her to write it down.
Good.
Get her to write it down.
Write it down. What else?
Or you can just say, I know that you have some very good ideas to contribute to the discussion, but I'm going to get back to you, but I would like to hear some other students.
Another form of overly enthusiastic Elizabeth is overly energetic Elizabeth, where sometimes just having them like, you're going to be our designated note taker for today, or you're going to either write it on the board or write notes on paper, meaning finding an outlet for their energy in a productive way, but in a way that doesn't hijack the entire class discussion. So kind of directing them to a special and unique role that they can play that keeps everything in check. Off topic, Ovadia. Sorry, off topic, Oriel for today. There's no Oriel here, is there? Yes.
Elizabeth, what I thought she sure do was that she gave students Post-it notes.
Okay.
And they could write their comments down. So if you didn't reach them in discussion, you had a Post-it note.
Nice.
And then there was a place on the wall where you could put your little comment. And it was amazing how many students didn't feel their comment needed validation once it wasn't just the sound of their voice.
Interesting. It also helps filter like who really has substantive things to share. Interesting. Thank you. So off topic, Oriel, any? Thoughts? Students are just all, yeah, how do you deal with things that students are always just bringing in directions that, yeah.
So what you have to do is give the student the trust that you are going to be able to answer their inquiries. So you say, it's an excellent question. I would love to talk to you about it after class, and actually follow through. And when you actually follow through, the level of anxiety is like relieved, and they know that anytime they ask a question in class, they can count on you to answer it, whether it's on the spot or not.
Mm-hmm.
But that I found really even takes away from that type of wanting to ask a question, because so often it's just wanting to stick their 2 cents in or,
right.
you know, participate in some other way, impulsive way.
Yes.
I don't know if this was said, but sometimes with the off-topic Obadiah, you don't know the answer because you didn't really prepare that aspect of your lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really okay for teachers to say, you know, I don't really have a full picture regarding that question, so I'm going to look it up and get back to you and really try to get back to that.
Great. I think there is that balance between, on the one hand, we want students to feel like we hear them and their questions are important to us. On the other hand, it is perfectly okay and important and legitimate for us to maintain, you know, we have certain goals for the lesson, and for us to get there. Again, making sure there's some way for their other questions to be addressed. But, you know, there's a very big difference between being like accommodating and understanding and letting them kind of derail it, and it's okay nipping it in the bud to address that, to kind of get things back to where we're at. Okay, we get 3:30 on the dot. All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.